Richard Blackwell had always believed that numbers told the truth. For 30 years, he built his empire one calculated risk at a time, watching those numbers climb higher and higher on screens, just like the ones that now showed his world falling apart. The trading floor was empty now. Everyone had gone home hours ago, but Richard stayed frozen in his leather chair, watching the red lines plunge downward like a knife through his chest. 48 years old, and he had lost everything in a single day. The investment that was supposed to secure his legacy, the one he had been so certain about, had collapsed. His company, his savings, his reputation, all of it vanished into those declining red numbers. He loosened his tie and let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The office felt different in the silence. Cold somehow, despite all the expensive furnishings he had carefully selected over the years. His father's voice echoed in his memory from decades ago, telling young Richard that money was security and security was everything. Richard had believed him. He had sacrificed so much, missed so many moments with his daughter Emily as she grew up, always choosing one more deal, one more meeting, one more chance to add another million to his worth. And now Emily was grown and living across the country, and he barely knew her anymore. The sound of a cart rolling across the floor broke through his thoughts. He looked up to see her, the young woman who cleaned the offices every evening. She couldn't have been more than 30, with blonde hair pulled back and bright eyes that always seemed to notice things. She wore the standard blue uniform of the cleaning service, and those yellow gloves that somehow made her look both professional and kind at the same time. He had seen her countless times over the past 2 years, but had never really looked at her until now. Richard had never even asked her name. She worked quietly around the office, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces while he continued to stare at the screens. He should leave. There was nothing more he could do here, but something kept him in that chair. Maybe it was shame. Maybe he just didn't know where else to go. The woman, whose name tag read Sarah, moved closer to his desk. She glanced at the screens and then at him with an expression that wasn't pity, but something gentler, something like understanding. "Long night, sir?" she asked softly. Richard nodded without looking at her. His throat felt tight, and he didn't trust his voice. Sarah continued her work, dusting the monitors and organizing the papers scattered across his desk. Then she paused. Her hand hovered over a single sheet that had fallen onto the floor beside his chair, partially hidden under the edge of his desk. "Sir, you forgot this one paper," she said quietly, holding it out to him with her yellow-gloved hand. Richard barely glanced at it. "It doesn't matter anymore," he said, his voice hollow. "Nothing matters anymore." But Sarah didn't pull the paper back. She stood there patiently, still holding out, and something in her steady presence made him take it from her. He looked down at the document, and his heart stopped. It was the insurance policy, the one his lawyer had insisted he signed 5 years ago, the one that protected against catastrophic investment losses. Richard had forgotten about it completely, dismissed it as unnecessary at the time because he never imagined he would need it. His hand started to shake as he read through the terms. This single piece of paper meant he wasn't completely ruined. He would have to start over. Yes, and he would lose most of what he had built, but this policy would cover enough to keep him from bankruptcy, enough to give him a second chance. He looked up at Sarah with tears burning in his eyes. "How did you know?" he whispered. Sarah smiled gently and began to put away her cleaning supplies. "My father lost everything once," she said. "I was just a little girl, but I remember him sitting at our kitchen table looking just like you do now, like the world had ended." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. "But my mother, she found an old savings bond that his grandmother had given him years before, something he'd forgotten about and tucked away. It wasn't much, but it was enough for him to start a small business, and that business put me through school." Richard wiped his eyes, not caring any more about maintaining his composure. "I'm sorry," he said. I've seen you here for 2 years, and I never even learned your name. Never thanked you for keeping this place running." Sarah's smile widened. "That's all right, sir, but maybe now would be a good time to start. My name is Sarah Mitchell." "I'm Richard," he said, and it felt strange to introduce himself after all this time. "Richard Blackwell, and I owe you more than I can ever repay." Sarah shook her head as she pushed her cart toward the door. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Blackwell, but maybe you could do something for someone else someday, someone who needs a hand when they've fallen. My father always said that the best way to honor kindness is to pass it along." Richard sat alone again after she left, but the office didn't feel cold anymore. He looked at the paper in his hands and then at the family photo on his desk, the one of Emily when she was 7 years old at the beach, laughing with her arms spread wide. He hadn't taken her to the beach in years, hadn't really talked to her about anything meaningful in even longer. The numbers on the screen were still red, but Richard understood now that they were just numbers. They could go up and they could go down, but they weren't the measure of his life. The measure of his life was in the moments he had missed and the people he had overlooked while chasing those numbers higher and higher. He picked up his phone and called Emily. It rang 4 times, and he almost hung up, but then he heard her voice. "Dad, is everything okay?" "No," Richard said honestly. "No, everything is not okay, but I want to tell you about it, if you have time." "I always have time for you, Dad," Emily said, and Richard could hear the surprise in her voice mixed with something that sounded like hope. They talked for 2 hours. Richard told her about the losses and the fear and the paper Sarah had found. He told her about all the things he had been too proud or too busy to say before. Emily listened, and then she told him about her life, about the struggles and joys he had missed while building his empire. When they finally said goodnight, Richard felt something he hadn't felt in years, a lightness in his chest that had nothing to do with money or success. The next morning, Richard walked into the office early and waited for Sarah to arrive for her evening shift. When she finally came through the door at 6 o'clock, he was ready. "Sarah," he called out, "could I speak with you for a moment?" She looked worried as she approached, as if she might be in trouble. "I want to offer you a job," Richard said quickly. "Not cleaning, though your work here has been impeccable, but I'm starting over and I need someone who notices things, someone who sees what others miss, someone with wisdom beyond their years." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "I would also like to set up a scholarship fund in your father's name," Richard continued, "for people who need a second chance, who need someone to believe in them, and I was hoping you might help me run it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Blackwell, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Richard smiled. "And please call me Richard.